You ever get that feeling like you're just surrounded by
Yeah.
too much stuff, maybe too much information?
Mm.
It can really feel like a weight on your mind, can't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, in this deep dive, we're looking at a pretty fascinating idea. Could actually having less in our lives lead to more, especially when it comes to our mental well-being?
That's exactly the question we're digging into. We're going to explore the many ways minimalism and mental health seem to connect.
Right.
And we've pulled together some really interesting material. I mean, everything from ancient philosophy about simple living right up to the latest brain research, and even how these ideas pop up in like market trends today.
And our goal for you listening is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the most important insights about how maybe embracing a minimalist mindset might impact your psychological health.
Yeah, we want to look at both sides, the benefits everyone talks about, but also, some of the potential downsides or complications.
Exactly, to help you figure out if and maybe how these concepts could be relevant in your own life. Okay, so let's dive in. Yeah.
Do it.
And I guess to really get this, we should probably start by looking back. Like, how long have these ideas even been around?
That's a great place to start. Because, this idea of rejecting too much stuff, it's not new at all. If we go back, way back, maybe 2,500 years,
Mm.
you find people like Diogenes.
Diogenes, right? The philosopher who lived in a barrel.
That's the one. Lives with almost nothing. A cloak, a stick, a pouch, apparently. Preferred a simple barrel to a house.
It was a very deliberate, very early choice to live with just the basics. Really went against the grain back then.
Wow. Talk about radical decluttering. And that idea, focusing on what's essential, that seems to pop up in a lot of philosophies, doesn't it? Like Stoicism.
Oh, definitely. Stoicism really emphasized, handling difficulties without getting overwhelmed, focusing on your inner resilience.
It's almost like a mental minimalism, right? Focusing inward, not on external stuff. Exactly.
Yeah.
The Stoics taught that real happiness comes from, well, virtue and inner peace, not from piling up possessions or being controlled by what happens outside. That focus on inner contentment, that's a really key precursor to modern minimalism.
Okay.
Then, if we jump forward quite a bit,
hmm
we get to 19th century America, the Transcendentalists. Think Emerson, Thoreau.
Ah, Thoreau, Walden Pond, the cabin. That image is practically synonymous with simple living, isn't it?
It really is. And he actually lived it. There's that famous line from Walden. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life.
I love that quote. It just hits that feeling, that desire a lot of us have, I think, for a more intentional life, cutting out the noise.
It really captures that core idea, that deliberate focus on what really matters. Now, fast forward again. It's interesting how minimalism then takes on a whole new meaning in the art world.
Right, from philosophy to art galleries. Tell us about that shift. That was what, the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, around then. In art, minimalism was a real, sharp break from what came before.
Yeah.
Artists like Agnes Martin, Dial Judd, Frank Stella, they deliberately moved away from all the emotion and expression that was dominant.
Okay.
Their work was really stark, simple, basic geometric shapes, maybe just one color, stripping away the artist's personality, any obvious emotion. The idea was to focus just on the art itself, the pure experience of it.
So the art becomes kind of a blank slate,
Yeah.
lets the viewer have their own experience. Huh. Fascinating how that idea of stripping away excess shows up everywhere.
Mhm.
And it didn't just stay in art galleries, did it? It started to spread.
Oh, absolutely. That aesthetic, it really influenced other areas. Music, for instance. Composers like Steve Reich, Philip Glass. Exploring minimalist structures, repetition.
Right, that repetitive music.
Exactly. And literature, too. Think Hemingway, Beckett, very spare, very understated styles. And then, crucially, fashion and design. People like Coco Chanel, Roy Halston, later Helmut Lang. They brought in these sleek, uncluttered designs. And then, by the 80s, 90s, this whole aesthetic starts morphing into more of a lifestyle choice, partly driven by, growing worries about consumerism, the environment.
So it went from art to design to a whole way of living, which kind of brings us to today, right? Why does minimalism seem to strike such a chord now? What's the modern appeal?
Well, modern minimalism really builds on all that history. It's definitely, I think, a reaction to just how overwhelming modern life can feel. The constant digital noise, the information overload, just the sheer amount of stuff around us.
Totally.
And it's interesting, you look at the numbers. only about maybe 11% of U.S. adults actually call themselves minimalists.
Yeah.
26% say they're interested in the idea.
Wow, that's a big difference. 11% doing it, 26% thinking about it.
Yeah, it's just there's this growing feeling that maybe there's a better, more intentional way to handle all this complexity.
We should definitely talk later about maybe why more people aren't jumping in despite the interest. But for now, let's stick with the appeal. You mentioned Dieter Rams, the designer. How do his ideas connect to mental well-being?
Right, Ram's principles for good design, things like, innovation, usefulness, aesthetics, being easy to understand, restraint, they're actually really relevant here.
How so?
Well, think about how a minimalist space, kind of like good software design, reduces what psychologists call cognitive load. It's clearer, easier to process, it prioritizes what's essential.
Ah, okay. Less brain work needed.
Exactly. Which can lead to clearer thinking, fewer distractions, and ultimately maybe a greater sense of calm and control.
That makes total sense. Less visual mess equals less mental mess. And this isn't just like a feeling, is it? There's actual science looking at this. Our brains on clutter.
Oh, yeah. There's research, for instance, from the Princeton Neuroscience Institute showing the visual clutter literally competes for your brain's attention.
Really? Competes?
Yeah. It's not just that a messy room looks bad. It actually makes your brain work harder. It diverts resources away from what you're trying to focus on, and it can even increase stress hormones.
Wow.
So the key thing is, a cluttered space isn't just messy. It's actively, physiologically stressing out your brain.
That is fascinating. So that feeling, when your desk is piled high or your inbox is overflowing, it's not just you being fussy, it's a real neurological thing happening.
Precisely.
Do we know how common this feeling is? Like how many people feel overwhelmed by clutter?
We do have some numbers. Studies suggest around 70% feel overwhelmed by clutter, and about 60% report feeling more stressed in chaotic environments.
70%, that's huge.
It is. And what's more, researchers have actually found links between disorganized spaces and higher levels of cortisol, that main stress hormone.
So it's measurable stress, not just aesthetics, but biology. Okay, so what about the flip side? What are the tangible benefits people actually report when they start, decluttering or adopting minimalist ideas?
Well, the improvements people report are often pretty striking. We see things like a 70% increase in reported ability to focus.
70% focus boost.
Nice. And around a 75% rise in reported productivity. But it's not just about, getting more tasks done. It seems to extend to making better decisions, maybe even thinking more creatively.
Why is that?
Well, the thinking is that those mental resources aren't being constantly drained by processing all the extra stuff, visual or otherwise. They're freed up.
So declutter your space, declutter your mind, get a performance upgrade. That's pretty compelling.
It is.
And sounds like this is catching on, right? Based on what's happening in the market.
Definitely. Consumer preference is shifting. I think it was 63% said they preferred minimalist design in 2023. And the market for minimalist furniture is huge, nearly $50 billion globally. And it's still growing pretty fast.
So people are actually buying into this, literally.
Seems that way. It shows a real shift in what people are starting to value in their homes and workspaces.
Okay, so we get the appeal, the science, the benefits. But who is this appealing to most? Are there patterns in who's adopting this lifestyle?
Yeah, there's some interesting trends. We generally see more interest among women than men. And the age group showing the highest engagement seems to be folks between 35 and 54.
35 to 54. Any thoughts on why that might be?
Well, purely speculating, but that's often a stage of life with, pretty significant demands, right? Career, maybe family responsibilities.
The sandwich generation, pulled in all directions.
Exactly. So maybe the desire for simplification, for regaining some control, just feels particularly strong then.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned that gap earlier. Lots of interest, fewer actually doing it. We'll come back to why that might be.
Right.
But first, let's go deeper into the why behind the calm, that feeling people get. What's happening in the brain exactly when we cut the clutter?
Okay, back to the brain science. As we touched on, cluttered environments just overload the visual cortex. Too much information coming in. Your brain has to work really hard just to sort through it all. And that constant processing uses up cognitive resources, leads to that feeling of mental fatigue being drained.
Makes sense.
Minimalist environments, though, they reduce that sensory overload. Fewer things vying for attention. So the visual cortex isn't working nearly as hard.
Which frees up brain power.
Exactly. Frees up those neural resources for better focus, deeper thinking.
Yeah.
And like we said, This reduced cognitive load seems directly linked to lower cortisol levels, hence less stress. That 75% stress reduction figure we mentioned earlier likely ties into this.
So it's a direct physiological effect, not just tidiness, but actually optimizing your brain's working environment.
Cool. And it sounds like the benefits aren't just about less stress, right? It goes further.
Oh, absolutely. Another big one is reducing decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Just think about all the tiny decisions we make every single day. What should I wear? Where did I put that thing? What email do I answer first? In a cluttered life, physical or digital, there are just more decisions.
Minimalism, by its nature, tends to reduce the number of choices you face daily. Fewer clothes, fewer items to manage, maybe fewer commitments. This saves that precious mental energy for the decisions that actually matter.
Conserving brain power. I like it.
And there's another layer, too. The process of minimalism, intentionally choosing what to keep, what to let go of it, forces you to think about your values, what's truly important.
Okay.
And when you clarify those values and start aligning your stuff, your time with them, it can lead to this greater sense of psychological coherence. Like your life makes sense, it fits together.
Yeah.
And that feeling is strongly linked to overall well-being.
Living in alignment, that sounds really valuable, especially now. But, okay, like anything, there must be downsides, right? Or unexpected twists. What are some potential psychological sort of traps or challenges with minimalism?
Yeah, it's definitely not all smooth sailing for everyone. For some people, it can become, well, almost an unhealthy focus, like obsessive decluttering. Yeah, where the need to constantly get rid of things actually starts causing anxiety itself, becomes another stressor.
I can see that.
There can also be a kind of FOMO fear of missing out, but related to getting rid of things. You know, worrying, what if I need this someday? Or letting go of something sentimental, even if it's just cluttering things up now.
That just-in-case pile. Yeah, that's a tough one. Finding that balance.
Exactly. And then there's the social side we hinted at.
Right, relationships. How does that play out?
Well, if your minimalist values clash significantly with friends or family, it can cause friction. Maybe you decline gifts, or you don't want to participate in shopping-heavy activities, or your home just looks very different. It can lead to misunderstandings, maybe even feeling a bit isolated sometimes. And that's important, because strong social connections are absolutely vital for mental health.
So it's a balancing act, your values versus potentially straining relationships. Okay, let's pull back for a second. If we weigh all this up, what are the main sort of documented benefits we've seen across the board?
Okay, summarizing the positives. We see pretty solid evidence for stress reduction, both reported and sometimes physiological, like lower cortisol.
Check.
Big improvements in focus and productivity, likely from fewer distractions.
Got it.
Potential financial benefits, being more mindful about spending, maybe feeling more secure, less money stress.
Makes sense.
For those concerned about the environment, reducing consumption can definitely ease eco-anxiety, aligning actions with values.
Good point.
And maybe the biggest one, that shift away from focusing on stuff towards experiences and relationships, that often leads to deeper connections, more life satisfaction overall.
Those are some really significant upsides. But we also touched on some, let's call them puzzles or paradoxes of minimalism. Let's dig into those a bit more.
Sure. One big one is sometimes called the minimalist paradox. The idea is, okay, minimalism means buy less, right? But it often encourages buying better quality things that last longer.
Which usually costs more upfront.
Exactly. So that higher initial cost can be a real hurdle for people without much disposable income. The long-term goal might be financial freedom, but getting started can actually be expensive for some.
Right. It almost feels like you need a certain level of financial cushion just to begin practicing that kind of minimalism.
It can seem that way.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole commodification thing.
Commodification.
Yeah, minimalism started as a pushback against consumerism, but now minimalism itself is being sold to us. You see these really expensive minimalist branded products.
Oh, yeah, the $300 minimalist t-shirt.
Exactly. So ironically, rejecting materialism can sometimes morph into this new kind of aspirational buying, even a status symbol. Look how minimalist I am with my perfectly curated expensive things.
The irony is definitely strong there. It's easy to fall into that trap, thinking you need the right minimalist gear.
Totally. And one more pitfall, getting too caught up in perfecting it.
How so?
The quest for the absolute perfect minimalist setup. It can lead to overthinking everything. Analysis paralysis, spending ages deciding what to keep, what to ditch, constantly chasing some ideal.
Right.
Which, again, ironically can end up creating more stress than it relieves.
So the search for simple gets really complicated.
Why?
It really shows you need to be intentional and self-aware about why you're doing it.
Definitely.
Are there any broader areas where the typical, maybe Western view of minimalism might be missing something? Blind spots?
Yes, I think there are a few important ones.
Yeah.
The socioeconomic piece we touched on is huge. Framing minimalism as this universally accessible choice often ignores the reality for people facing economic insecurity.
Right.
For someone worried about making ends meet, having more of certain things, extra food, backup supplies can feel like safety, like security, not clutter. The whole less is more mantra feels very different in that context.
That's a really critical point. Minimalism as a choice can definitely feel like a privilege sometimes.
It can. And there are cultural blind spots, too. A lot of Western minimalism focuses heavily on individual possessions, aesthetics. But that can overlook how objects hold deep cultural or family meaning in other parts of the world.
How so?
Items might be tied to tradition, family history, community identity in ways that go way beyond just their function or look. Discarding them isn't simple.
Okay.
And lastly, the heavy focus on individual choice in minimalism. Sometimes it lets the bigger picture off the hook. You know, the systemic things, the societal pressures that drive consumer culture in the first place. Decluttering your own house is great, but it doesn't necessarily change the system that encourages us all to buy so much.
Those are really important nuances, considering the wider context, not just individual actions.
Right.
And it sounds like this means minimalism isn't practiced the same way everywhere.
Oh, definitely not. It takes really different forms depending on the culture. Think about Japanese minimalism, that idea of ma, the importance of empty space. It's deeply tied to Zen philosophy, very different feel. Then you have Scandinavian minimalism, often more focused on function, simplicity and design, clean lines, but still cozy, practical and aesthetic.
Right.
Kind of related, yeah. Then maybe in some African cultures, the emphasis might be less on individual reduction and more on communal sharing of resources. In Latin American cultures, you often see vibrant color and pattern used within simple forms, a totally different visual take on minimalism.
Fascinating. So it's really not one size fits all.
Not at all. It really highlights how cultural values shape even our relationship with stuff.
Which brings us back to that question. Is minimalism, the way it's often promoted, maybe a bit of a luxury?
That socioeconomic accessibility question is key. Research does suggest that people with lower incomes might, quite logically, prioritize quantity or reliability over the high-end quality often associated with minimalist brands.
Because security matters more.
Exactly. When money's tight, having spares, having things that just work, even if they aren't aesthetically perfect, can be much more important than having fewer expensive items. So yeah, it definitely raises that question. Is the ability to choose minimalism, especially the kind that involves buying premium replacements or having spacious, uncluttered homes, is that itself a form of privilege?
It's definitely food for thought. Okay, to make this more concrete, are there any real stories, real people whose lives really show the impact minimalism can have on mental well-being?
Absolutely. There are quite a few compelling examples. Maybe the best known are Joshua Fields Millburn and Ryan Nicodemus, the minimalists.
Oh, yeah, I know them. The documentary, the podcast.
Right. There's stories about achieving conventional success, good jobs, nice things, but feeling deeply unfulfilled, and how exploring minimalism became their path to finding meaning beyond just material stuff.
That's powerful. Any others?
There are stories of people going through major life changes, like losing a job, and finding that radically decluttering their physical space actually helped them cope. Instead of adding stress during uncertainty, it created a sense of mental clarity, focus, resilience.
Interesting. Creating order externally to help internally.
Kind of. And there's Mia Danielle, who wrote about using minimalism as part of her mental health recovery journey alongside more traditional treatments. Creating a calmer, less overwhelming environment really supported her healing process.
Those personal accounts really bring the ideas to life, don't they? Show the potential for real change. Okay, so if someone's listening and this is really resonating, they want to learn more, where should they look? Any key resources?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to dive deeper, there's a book by Allison Hodge specifically called Minimalism and Mental Health.
Perfect title.
Right. Greg McKeown's book Essentialism isn't strictly about minimalism, but it's fantastic on prioritizing what truly matters, which is a core principle.
Essentialism, got it.
The documentary, Minimalism, a documentary about the important things, gives a great overview through different people's stories. And for ongoing listening, the Minimalist Podcast, obviously, and another one called Clear Intentions with Diane Bowden, both offer lots of practical advice and discussions.
Great list. We'll make sure those are easy for you to find. Now,
Mm-hmm.
for someone listening who's maybe thinking, okay, I'm intrigued, but where do I even start?
Yeah.
What are some good questions to ask yourself to figure out your own relationship with less?
That's a great point.
Huh.
Drawing from folks like the minimalists and others, some really helpful starting questions could be, does this thing, this commitment, whatever it is, does it actually add value to my life? Simple, but powerful.
Does it add value?
Okay.
Oh.
Or do I even feel like my house or maybe my schedule is just always messy, always overwhelming? Do I ever just wish I had less stuff, fewer obligations?
Those really get you thinking.
And maybe dig a bit deeper. How might embracing minimalism affect how I express myself or connect with my family, my culture? And practically, can I actually afford to replace things I get rid of with better quality ones if that's the goal? Is this minimalist look even right for my actual home, my life right now?
Those are really smart questions. Helps you approach it thoughtfully, not just jump on a bandwagon. Okay, finally, for someone who does want to try it out, what are some balanced, maybe less intimidating ways to start? How can you make it work for you?
Yeah, definitely don't feel like you have to change everything overnight. Start small. Pick one drawer, one shelf, one corner of a room, or maybe one area of your digital life, like email subscriptions.
Okay, small steps.
The one in, one out rule can be really helpful for maintenance. For every new thing that comes in, something similar has to go out.
Keeps things from piling up again.
Exactly. And remember mental minimalism, too. It's not just about physical stuff. Think about reducing digital noise, simplifying your thoughts, maybe, limiting unnecessary decisions throughout the day.
Mental minimalism, I like that.
Connecting these practices with mindfulness can really help, too. Being more aware of your choices, your consumption. And maybe the most crucial thing, figure out your personal why.
Your why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you drawn to this? Is it for less stress, more time, financial freedom, saving the planet? Knowing your core motivation helps you tailor an approach that actually works for you, supports your well-being, instead of just following some external rules. It has to be personal.
Find your own why. That makes so much sense. Okay, so summing this all up, it really sounds like embracing minimalism in whatever form works for you offers some really compelling potential benefits for mental health. Reducing the clutter, focusing on what matters.
Definitely potential there.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, it's absolutely not a magic bullet, not a one-size-fits-all cure. It has its own complexities, its own potential pitfalls to watch out for.
Right. That personalized approach seems key. Finding your meaningful minimalism, like you said, guided by your own values, your own needs, not just chasing an aesthetic.
Exactly that. What brings one person calm might stress someone else out. It's about finding your balance.
Okay. So, on that note, here's maybe a final thought for you to take away today. Think about everything we've discussed. The physical stuff, yeah, but also the digital clutter, the mental load. What's maybe one small area in your life, physical, digital, mental, whatever, that you might consider simplifying or decluttering? Not necessarily to achieve some perfect look, but just for maybe a little more ease, a little more focus. It doesn't have to be huge. Just one small step towards possibly finding a bit more in your own version of less. Something to think about.